Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is Martin Lush here, President of NSF Health Sciences, the pharmaceutical and biotech group at least. A very warm welcome to you all. So really, by way of introduction, this is our first of our free 2015 webinars. And really our objective here, everyone, is to is to really meet the needs of our clients. We take that very seriously indeed. You know, the industry is challenged in a number of areas, and you know, each one of you working really, really hard, doing the best that you can. And the objective of these webinars, I'm not going to go through them blow by blow. You can see them on the screen in front of you, and they're also in our journal that if it hasn't hit your desk already, we'll be hitting it very soon. So you can see in January we're doing human reliability, and in each one of the months we're aiming to provide you some practical sort of hands-on guidance in areas that we know many companies are challenged. And I'm going to refer to some of these as we go through this particular session. One other thing actually is that we're going to go for a later start. Certainly for some of our colleagues in the US, this is a pretty early start for them. So we're going to be starting some of these sessions probably 2 o'clock rather than 1 o'clock, so it makes it a bit more convenient for guys further east than Greenwich time, but Greenwich time. So anyway, first off, a series of webinars that we sincerely hope that you're going to find extremely valuable and useful, and will hopefully make your life easier, because that's really what they're designed to do. So by way of introduction, I mean, there are some familiar names coming up on my screen in front of me, so many of you already know me. Probably you're looking at that picture and saying, that's not a most recent picture, Martin, you don't look that young anymore. I think you're probably right. But I've been in the industry for over 32 years, and really from hospitals where I started to make total parenteral nutritions all the way through to pharmaceuticals, involved in manufacturing primarily of sterile products. I've acted as a QP, so I've spent time in quality assurance, QC, operations, audit. But one of my, I guess my passions is trying to understand people, what they think, how they think, why they think it, and importantly, what we can do to use that knowledge to actually improve reliability, and as such drive down the types of errors and mistakes that so many of us actually experience. A good thing is I'm not alone in that passion, and in having that knowledge. I'm surrounded by a lot of very good people, colleagues both in the US, that's Matt, Jim and Bill, who can provide this type of expertise, as well as my colleagues in Europe, Erica, Giovanni, Martin, Terry, Stuart. We've got other members of the team also very passionate about this whole subject, this whole area of human reliability. One of the reasons we're passionate about it is really our objective is to maximize your efficiency in a very challenging environment by reducing human error, and in doing so improving people reliability, human reliability in the workplace. I mean, this is really key because the industry is really challenged with things like drug shortages that have, you know, direct patient impacts, you know, numbers of recalls on the increase, numbers of warning letters and consent decrees also on the increase, leading to, you know, incredible loss of efficiency, loss of products, as well as taking its toll on people like yourself and many of your colleagues. So this is the whole area of error reduction and improvement in human reliability is key. I mean, if you look at this data here that we've accumulated relating to deviation investigations, you know, the number attributed to human error, the very high percentage of incidents that actually reoccur, and in doing so increase risk and also really compromise our efficiency in what is a really challenging environment economically around the world. Now, the types of things, a lot of virtually everything that I'm going to be talking about in the next in the next few minutes through to 2 o'clock is advice that is not just conjured out of thin air. It's really advice that we've sought from experts in human reliability. So, we spent a huge amount of time, probably 7 or 8 years ago, when we designed this education consultancy support program for human error reduction and improvement in reliability. We spent a lot of time with experts in the nuclear industry and in aviation, in aerospace, military, as well as academics who've studied the subject of human reliability and error reduction in considerable detail. And what we noticed in that research was that although these industries are very different, in their desire to drive down errors and improve human reliability, they actually did some very, very similar things. And we've identified 10 key characteristics of error reduction and improvements in reliability. And this is what I'm really going to base this session on, to give you a flavor of what success looks like and how that success was achieved. Obviously, in the time allowed, the pace will be fairly rapid. There will be some areas I will spend a little more time on and getting into a little more detail, whereas there'll be other areas where I will probably glance over fairly quickly. So the key message to take away is that everything that I describe here in terms of philosophy and most importantly in terms of practical steps that you can take is possible. It is being practiced. They do work. But this is not a project. This is a journey. This is a ongoing campaign that never ever stops. I think in the pharma industry we're always guilty of, picking up on a flavor of the month, trying it for a bit and then dropping it, moving on to the next thing. But when it comes to human reliability, this is a journey that never ever stops. Now, when we look at the facts relating to human errors, the statistics are quite startling. Although, having said that, probably not surprising to many of you who've been in the industry for a few years. What we do know is that 96% of workplace errors involve human factors. There's no question of that. And Deming, Edwards Deming, the great, probably the greatest in my opinion of the quality gurus, estimated that 93% of the mistakes and defects were not actually due to people's actions at the sharp end, so to speak, but were actually due to systems created by management rather than the operator or the worker. And we'll come back to that point later on as we move through the session. Please, if you do have any questions, you have the opportunity on the chat function to post those questions to me. I'll do my very, very best to address those. But obviously, after the session, you can send me any emails. You can contact me, and completely free, and we will get back to you with some answers and some solutions. Now, I said to you earlier that I'm a bit of a frustrated psychologist because I've always been fascinated by why people make mistakes, why people do incredibly silly things, and often very intelligent people doing very, very silly things. And there's some interesting slides here that when you look at some incredulity, you look at it and think, how could somebody stand on a metal ladder in a swimming pool and an electrical drill, more concerned with the safety of his eyes because he's got safety goggles on, rather than being electrocuted. And it's actually trying to understand, why people do silly things. And when my son saw this picture, he said, "Dad, that's clearly set up." To which my wife responded, "Well, when you combine men and beer, anything is possible." And she also commented when she saw all of these slides that the common feature throughout was that all men are involved. But we won't go down that route. because we'll be here a lot longer than anticipated. But when you look at pictures like this, look at situations that created these events, this one I find particularly challenging. You ask yourself the question, what was driving these guys to do what clearly is a crazy thing to do? And clearly these guys are focused on one thing, and that is to get the job done. Now we can look at these slides and laugh to ourselves about how funny they are and what crazy things people actually do, but in the pharma industry we've got to get really serious about error prevention and improving human reliability, because errors can cost lives. It's as simple as that. And certainly in my 32 years experience in the industry and the experience of my colleagues, what we all know is that errors are preventable. Errors have cost lives. There's no question of that. Associated with that, these errors and mistakes and poor human reliability will, and unfortunately do, destroy reputations as well as the self-confidence of the organization. It costs our business a huge amount of money, and we've certainly, in our dealings with some clients, seen their businesses ruined as a result of errors that are preventable and human reliability that wasn't what it needed to be. And in the pharma industry, as we all know, these errors can have a catastrophic impact. And this was one of note. I think this was probably about 9 or 10 years ago in the United Kingdom, where a tragic incident where a premature baby died from a sugar overdose. And premature babies are often fed intravenously through what we call a total parenteral nutrition, which was it actually happened in this case. Now you think, well, how on earth did this happen? And what the investigation showed everyone was that this was the batch manufacturing record of the TPN manufactured by the pharmacist in question. And that's a pretty simple BMR. I think we all wish we had formula that was really that simple. And you think, well, how could a mistake happen when the formulation is so simple? So, the addition of Vanillalac and water for injection and glucose, and that's a done deal. But when you looked at the rig used for manufacturing this TPN, you can see bottle 1, Vanillalac, bottle 2, glucose, and bottle 3, water for injection. And for the very astute amongst you, you would have already seen or observed the reason why this was an accident waiting to happen. Namely, that's the sequence on the batch manufacturing record. That is the sequence that the pharmacist followed, and you can see the sequence is incorrect. So really it was a situation waiting to happen. And unfortunately what the investigation showed was that there were a few near misses, and the actions that they took were these. They extended the SOP, they added a few more check signatures, they did lots more retraining, and they closed the incident out as human error. And I don't know about you, but I look at those corrective actions and they all sound and look very familiar, because frankly these are very common actions when human reliability or lack of it is seen as a cause of a deviation incident. We make things more complicated by extending the SOP, we create false sense of security by adding check signatures, we do lots more retraining that didn't work before, and then we sign off the deviation, convincing ourselves the job is done. Clearly it is not. And this is one of the reasons, ladies and gentlemen, that the regulators are extremely concerned when human error is used, frankly, as an excuse for not doing an investigation thoroughly, or the conclusion is made through ignorance or lack of understanding of what causes human error and poor human reliability, and what we need to do to fix that. And this is from Volume 4 of the European GMP Guide. I'm not going to read through it totally there, but what it's saying is, look, when you've experienced a problem where human error is suspected or identified as the cause, you better be able to justify that by excluding the other possible contributing factors, whether they be unreliable processes, overcomplicated procedures, and so on and so forth. And really I applaud the regulators for taking this action, that it's really saying, look, don't record human error unless you have the data, unless you have the justification to do so, because otherwise we're going to come after you. So obviously being taken very, very seriously. Now I mentioned earlier, everyone, that what we at NSF Health Sciences talk about when we help our clients improve human reliability and drive down human error is being practiced as we speak. We spend a lot of time with the experts in the aviation industry and so on to really understand what they have done. And in doing so, we identified 10 best practices. And what I'm going to do in the time that remains, ladies and gentlemen, is to move our way through and describe some more fully than others, but not just describe the 10 best practices, but to give you a flavor of the types of actions these industries have taken to improve human reliability by driving down mistakes and errors. So one of my challenges to you, if you can grab a piece of paper, and for each of the 10 that I describe, simply give yourself a score. If what I describe sounds identical to what you do, give yourself a 10. If what I describe sounds completely the opposite to what you do, give yourself a lower score. So this gives you the opportunity at least to immediately, within the 45 minutes that we have left, to see what you do well and to identify those areas that you actually need to improve upon. Attribute number 1, let's move our way through these then, ladies and gentlemen. The companies that are really serious about improving reliability are really serious about looking below the surface of the problem. And in all of these companies, they really understand that there is no such thing as a single root cause for any problem or any incident or any deviation. And I think we've all been guilty of, when we use the terms root cause, it drives people to look for just one thing. Often that is what is immediately on the surface of the problem, normally the operator or the engineer, the person most directly associated with the incident. And then we prematurely conclude that it's human error. Now what we do know is that these contributing factors conspire or come together in what we call the error chain that ultimately results in the mistake being made. And a lot of research has been done, particularly in the safety arena, that concludes whether it be 10 or 14 contributing factors or links in the error chain for each major deviation. Some of these contributing factors are old, others are actually fairly recent. Some of these can remain dormant for many, many years in some cases, almost like ticking time bombs waiting for the opportunity to wreak havoc. The important thing is, if we're serious about improving human reliability, we have to be serious about the way we investigate errors and mistakes, and to recognize that there is always a pattern. The pattern is always predictable, and the error pattern is always preventable. One of the challenges that many companies face is to do with SOP non-compliance. We spend a lot of time and effort and money writing SOPs that actually are the single most contributing factor to poor reliability, because often they're overcomplicated, often they're written by the wrong person, often there's too many words, poor layouts, and there's a whole host of other contributing factors in that error chain you can see that all conspire to causing the error at the top, the surface of the problem. And that means that by understanding the error chain, by understanding multiple contributing factors, it means that we can actually do the investigation more thoroughly, encourage people to dig deep, because without fixing these and more, those errors will come back together with the associated risks. Similarly, if you were to look at another common problem we see with our clients is errors in batch manufacturing records, and there's a whole host of contributing factors, whether it be to do with poor design, whether it be to do with flipping backwards and forwards within the batch manufacturing record that relates to a distraction, whether it be one of our clients had calculation errors in their batch record because the batch record was in another room because there was no bench for the operator to complete it. So, we were investigating and attempting to improve human reliability with regard to batch manufacturing records. A good investigation would conclude these multiple contributing factors, and in doing so, allow us then to actually fix them. Oh yeah, Debbie, you've just asked the question, will the slides be available after the webinar? Yes, they certainly will. The webinar is also being recorded, everyone, so you'll be able to download the slides and you'll be able to listen to me again if you want to be tortured once again. So yes, they will be available. So remember, please, and this is the starting point if we're serious about improving human reliability, is that every problem is due to multiple contributing factors. And certainly within NSF, we truly believe that human error is never the cause, only the consequence. We truly believe that human error should be the starting point of an investigation, never ever the conclusion, or at least very rarely the conclusion. Now, there's two take-home messages that I really implore you to go away with over the next few days, is to remember those 2 points. And once we do, then we do far better in investigations. Now, under that attribute number 1, in other words, what the best in class do, in other words, understanding the anatomy of problems, here are some of the action points that some of our clients have followed up on to improve human reliability. Starts off with education of our problem solvers, and in particular senior management, to give them a far better understanding of the psychology of human error. I'm going to touch on that a little more after this slide. But until people remember and truly understand that we're not perfect people, we're actually designed to think quickly rather than accurately, our brains are easily overloaded and easily distracted, and I can go on. Until we understand the psychology of human error, we really don't have a basis on which to improve the systems to remove those errors and improve reliability. It's important that we dig under the surface, and I know many of you will be using the 5 Whys, which is a Toyota tool for problem solving, asking why 5 times in the hope that you at least get to 5 of the contributing factors. Easier said than done, because it's not just the question you ask, it's how you ask it. One of our clients actually removed human error from Trackwise, a pretty bold move, but a move that actually encouraged people to do a thorough investigation by not giving them an easy dustbin in which to place their deviations. Investing in quality time to complete quality investigations. So many of us are stretched with our time, and often investigations are done very, very quickly because of lack of time. But we pay the price for that because we end up having to go back and do them again. Often metrics drive the wrong behavior, and a lot of our clients are now really focusing on the right metrics that focus on repeat incidents. There are two, in my opinion, there are really 2 measures, effective measures for the deviation and CAPA system. One is to measure repeat incidents. That drives the behavior of doing the investigation well so it doesn't happen again. And another really good metric is to measure the time between the incident happening and the investigation taking place. The shorter that time, the more immediate the investigation, the better the investigation. And frankly, this 30-day rule is if it wasn't so damaging, it would be laughable, because as soon as we give that luxury of 30 days, it conveys to everybody that deviation investigations aren't important. and we end up with an investigation based on memory rather than fact. But I'll get off my soapbox on that one. And lastly, we've had some of our clients who have changed their deviation reporting template to focus on the term contributing factors to really force people to think more deeply about the problem so that they get into the real causes rather than just treating the superficial symptoms. Moving on to number 2 then, another attribute of companies that have improved their reliability is that they have focused very strongly on really understanding human behavior. Because there's a huge amount of research that is being done and is continuing to be completed on how we think and what the reasons why we continue to make mistakes. And here are some key summaries. I mean, we go into this in a huge amount of detail on our courses and in our consultancy. And in fact, for a number of the webinars that follow this year, when we talk about quality habits and we talk about risk-based decision making, we're actually dedicating a lot more focused time and effort on those subjects. But they all relate back to attribute number 2 for improving human reliability, which is to understand human behavior. Because what we do know is that, we have very complex brains, but brains designed to fight or flight. We are actually designed to think quickly rather than accurately. We are all emotional beings, some more so than others, and emotions and habits and bias play a huge part in our decision making. And most of us, in fact, are poor, very poor logical decision makers. Most decisions are based on gut feel, they're based on bias, they're based on what worked before. We also know that one part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, often known as the executive brain, that we require that is used for logical analysis and concentrated activities, has in fact a very limited attention span. It can only remember 7 facts plus or minus 2. We have a maximum attention span of 20 to 30 minutes, which is why I'm talking fairly quickly, because I know, particularly with webinars, your attention may be sort of dropping off after 20 to 30 minutes. What we also know is that the prefrontal cortex is very easily distracted. For those of you who have that, that alarm on your emails, you're in the middle of a really good Word document, the alarm pings up to say that you've got an email, you answer that email and you're immediately distracted, and it takes you, whether it be 15 to 20 minutes to refocus on what you were originally doing. So there's a great deal more that we cover on how we think and why we think, and how we use that knowledge to improve human reliability. Habits are a particular area of interest to us because, interestingly, I mean, most of you would have made New Year's Eve resolutions, and probably most of you have broken some of those. Interestingly, something like 80% of New Year's Eve resolutions never ever get past the first week, because we're actually asking our brains to break very old and very established habits. And the habits are simply, our ability to act without thinking, and something like 40 to 50% of our routine decisions, everything from what we wear in the morning to how we clean our teeth to driving to work, and probably some work-based decisions as well, are made through habits or patterns of behavior that are long established and extremely difficult to break. To put this into some practical perspective, when we change an SOP, we are at incredible risk of mistakes being made and reliability being compromised, because the users of that SOP, the old SOP, are conditioned, they are habituated to follow the original. So when we add or delete or change or completely replace an SOP, psychologically that is an impossible process we're asking operators and users of the SOP to follow, because they are habituated to the original SOP. So when you change something, it's impossible for them to follow unless they've practiced it considerably. So habits are key, and often a key source of errors and poor reliability, because as we change things, we need to think long and hard about changing the habits that need to then follow. And we spend an awful lot of time, when we talk about quality habits later on this year, everyone, we're going to talk about how you establish these habits, what we call the trigger events, the routine, and the reward. And it's understanding how habits are formed. We can then use that knowledge to create new habits, which is going to be the subject of a separate webinar. What we also know is that things like stress and fatigue lead to oversimplification in our mind, often distortion, and that leads to poor decision making. What we drink, what we eat, how we oxygenate, how we sleep, all have a profound effect on this very uniquely balanced organ called the brain. So when we change shift patterns, when people are working exceptionally long hours, we should not be surprised when errors and mistakes and poor reliability kicks in because of these reasons. And lastly, we're all very heavily influenced by group bias, by individual bias as well. So taking that knowledge, this is some example. These are some examples of what some of our clients have done by using the knowledge of how we think and designing, therefore, brain-friendly processes, brain-friendly SOPs. Here are some of the actions that some of our clients have taken. They have focused on educating people in how to make decisions. This is the subject of our April webinar, Risk-Based Decision Making, so that we can get people to follow a very structured and standardized, simple process that relies on accurate analysis of facts, a simple process that is therefore practiced and habituated, and therefore improving the decisions that then result. Because certainly in my sort of 32 years in consultancy, I would say a good number of issues relating to reliability and human error are actually due to poor decision making because of all of the reasons that we've actually discussed, and failure to follow a disciplined approach. I used to act as a QP many, many years ago, and one thing I learned to my cost is never to make decisions when stressed and fatigued, because one thing can be guaranteed, that they will probably be wrong. How we look after our brain is key. What we feed it, what we hydrate it with is really, really key. What is also really important is to forensically analyze mistakes to prevent habituation, because if we don't immediately stop when a mistake has been made, what will happen is that pattern, that sequence that led to that mistake will be repeated. And the best in class are truly obsessed with the Deming plan, do, check, and adjust cycle, which is constantly addressing what can be improved and therefore learning from mistakes. And as basic and as rudimentary as it sounds, high standards of good manufacturing practice go a long way to improving human reliability, because when you go into a room where GMP is practiced, you see a room that is tidy, neat, with everything in the right place, and therefore free of distraction for the brain. So GMP standards play a very high, are very important in improving human reliability. One quick question for you, what do the following have in common? Well, interestingly, all of these inventions, and there are many, many more, from Velcro, penicillin, Viagra, Post-its, and the like, all came from mistakes. And this takes us in to the next key attribute, ladies and gentlemen, of those companies and organizations who have improved human reliability. Not only do they really understand the anatomy of the problem, that's number one, the error chain. Not only do they have a good understanding of the psychology of human error that we've just discussed, number two. Number three, they have a really, really positive attitude to error. At the end of the day, we all make mistakes, and as Thomas Edison said, there is always a better way. And his another famous quote he gave us was that every deviation is actually a free lesson in what does not work. And we can use that lesson and learn from it and improve, or we can ignore it and it will happen again. So the attitude of deviations are good. The attitude that problems are a free lesson is one of the starting points in really improving human reliability, because we then get serious about the investigation, because we get serious about focusing on the cause rather than the consequence and unfortunately the people. In these companies that take a positive attitude to errors, they all recognize that there are multiple contributing factors. These companies work really hard to make everybody risk aware, so the people understand the consequences and the risks associated with poor reliability and mistakes. They are all convinced that problems are a catalyst for Kaizen, and in other words, improvements by very small incremental steps. People are rewarded for problem recognition rather than punished, and the objective is to improve, not punish. And importantly, all of these companies have very good expertise of their process, very good knowledge of their process. They do the basics to PhD level. And unfortunately, with many of the clients that I work with, very few of these are evident. Deviations are often seen as bad news. They're often seen as painful experiences, never to be repeated. But the investigations are often rushed, and the attitude towards the incidents is poor, and therefore those incidents happen again. So some of the action steps that some of our clients have taken to really improve reliability by improving number 3, which is our attitude to problems and mistakes, is things like, let's start measuring repeat incidents rather than the total number. One of the worst measures you can have on a deviation and CAPA system is to measure total number of deviations. Because as soon as you start to do that, and as soon as you start to say to people you're going to be measured by driving down incidents, well, guess what? Incidents are driven down, but they happen again because people don't always report them, because those measures are encouraging them to actually do so. They ditched the 30-day rule. I think it's a laughable rule. It's a damaging rule. It's become a habit for many companies, and it is wrong. For the best-in-class companies, they report incidents within minutes. They're triaged within hours. In other words, risk ranked. They're investigated quickly. They do the lessons learned, and as a result of that attitude, they really do add value. Just had a nice quote here from Ian. Glad you mentioned Deming. It's interesting. Edward Deming. It staggers me the number of people I talk to on courses and in consultancy engagements. When I ask them about Edward Deming, very few of them have actually heard of him. I would encourage you to Google him. Google his 14 points, because if the industry had followed his 14 points when he wrote them in 1953, we wouldn't be facing the drug shortages and the consent decrees and warning letters that we're facing now. But I'll get off my soapbox on that one as well. So some important action steps there under attribute number 3. Characteristic of all companies that really focus on improving human reliability. Just before I move on, John, you commented often 30 days is within an SOP. Often 30 days with an SOP to extend. It's an interesting point, John, because on the one hand, the key thing is the investigation must be done thoroughly well. And speed isn't always of the essence. To do an investigation quickly, or to do the investigation quickly is key, but the investigation has to be done thoroughly. And if that takes longer, then that is fine. But it's driven by the attitude and the focus on, we need to understand the problem and we need to prevent this happening again. Now, characteristic number 4 is an interesting one, ladies and gentlemen, because in all of these companies where human reliability is world-class, you find a culture that is open and blame-free, where there is total openness, there's total honesty and transparency, there's excellent communications, there's the freedom to speak out. When things do go wrong, the focus is on the problem, not the person who reported it. You have leadership walking the talk and demonstrating by what they do, not by what they say. You have measures that drive the right behaviour and so on. And I think it's quite worrying the number of companies I go to, and I talk to operators and guys at the sharp end, particularly on the shop floor, and I'd say a good 9 out of 10 companies that I go to actually have a blame culture. And when you have a blame culture, problems get hidden, they don't get shared, and when they're hidden, we can't fix them. And we can spend days on how to establish that blame culture, how to maintain that blame-free culture, because this for me is one of the biggest challenges that many companies face when they're under the pressures that they actually are. So, when we advise our clients and when we talk on our courses about this is an area that always engenders a lot of or engages a lot of people, because it's something most of us have experienced. Number 5, so in addition to understanding, number 1, the anatomy of the problem, understanding 2, why we make mistakes, the psychology of human error. Number 3, our attitude to problems. We then move on to number 5, which is something that our industry really has to grip and fix very, very quickly, which is war on complexity. And this is why we've dedicated a separate webinar to this one, ladies and gentlemen, in June, in fact, because putting it quite simply, simple things work, complex things usually do not. Human reliability is very closely associated with levels of complexity. So the simpler things are, the better. In those companies, in those industries where human reliability is cherished, what you will find are these attributes. Simplicity is recognized as smart and is rewarded as such, because simple things do work. Simple things save huge amounts of money. And in these organizations, complexity is simply not tolerated. This is I can see many people nodding heads here, because I think all of you suffer with levels of complexity that are unsustainable and unaffordable, and unless you fix these, your levels of reliability will go down, your levels of human error will go up. Interestingly, back in the days of the space race, when Russia and the US were racing towards the moon, NASA repeatedly spent millions of dollars on developing this pen that would write in a weightless environment, whereas the Russians simply used a pencil. Now, whether that's true, I don't know, but it makes a good story. Why do we have complexity? This really interests me, because if all of what I've just said is true, why on earth do we do it? Well, there's a lot of lazy thinking around in a lot of companies, and that lazy thinking leads to complexity. To put it quite bluntly, any idiot can complicate something. Any idiot can add check signatures to a batch record and extra pages to an SOP, but it takes real intellect and a lot of blood, sweat and tears to simplify and remove stuff, rather than just putting it in without giving it any due thought. One of the reasons I think the pharma industry is so overwhelmed by complexity is that historically we've been able to afford it. Those days are gone, which is the reason why I think this attribute number 5 is going to be top of the list of your priorities for the rest of your careers, because your companies can no longer afford to have levels of complexity that lead to poor human reliability, particularly, dare I say, in the field of documentation, where most of you have SOPs that are frankly impossible to follow. Often complexity is down to job protection, erosion of status, and there's a whole lot of other reasons that we don't have time to get into, because I'd really like to move on to what can you do about it? Because it's very easy to say remove complexity, but the reasons it's not done so often is because it's a shed load of work. It's an awful lot of work. And certainly on our courses and in our consultancy, we give people processes to how to simplify, and there are processes that you can use to actually simplify and to cut out unnecessary steps. And there has to be a process, it has to be disciplined, and it has to be structured, because otherwise it simply does not work, and that's what we cover on our course. We've had a number of our clients who, on their, for example, their change control systems and their deviation systems, they ensure these do not add complexity. One of our clients has a box on their change control impact assessment form that asks the simple question, does this change simplify or complicate? Does it add to or take away? And if the change proposal, the change requests, complicates, it's simply not approved. And I think that's bold, but it's going to take very bold and strong leadership to really cut back on the levels of complexity that many companies face, because they simply won't be around in 5 years' time. Auditors, good auditors simplify, bad auditors complicate. It really is that simple. And we've helped a number of our companies and our clients through educating their audits and self-inspection teams to focus on how to simplify, how to add value, not how to complicate. Number 6, ladies and gentlemen, this is practiced by virtually all of the companies that we've worked with who have significantly improved human reliability. And it is linked to number 5, removing complexity. It's called user-centered design. Now, we could spend a whole week talking about user-centered design. It's interesting, I've been in the industry a good number of years, and I can still remember when I was validating processes all those years ago, one of the first stages in validation is the definition, the user requirement statement. And the hint is in the title, the user requirement statement, but very rarely are users actually engaged in equipment design and equipment use. And that's where the complexity actually is introduced, because those involved in design often do not understand how the equipment is going to be used or how those procedures will be used on a routine basis. So the best-in-class companies put users as the center of their universe. Users have massive influence. Their needs are considered the most important, because most users of equipment, most users of anything just want to do it simply, to do it in a straightforward manner. And by engaging the users very early on, whether it be in writing SOPs, designing batch manufacturing records, you're far more likely to get to a simple solution, a workable solution, rather than one that is complicated. And that's an area that we talk about a lot on our course as to what is user-centered design. And in particular, documents. I mean, I'm going to stand on my soapbox on this one again, because this is something I'm really passionate about, because what we know about documents and how people read them, and this goes back to attribute number 2, which is understanding the brain. We know that people don't read working documents greater than 3 to 5 pages. People tend to skim and dip rather than read word by word, and yet we continue to write SOPs of 15, 20, 30 pages, and then we're surprised when they're not followed. What we do know is that reading ages vary considerably, so if the documents are not written in the language of the user, they will be misunderstood. We know words confuse. We know, on the other hand, that pictures are memorable and they provide clarity. And importantly, who the heck needs words anyway? This is an amazing fact. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters of a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letters be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? I find that quite an interesting slide because, unfortunately, most SOPs look and read a little like this, but when we start to use our knowledge of the brain, this is what a brain-friendly, user-centered, designed SOP actually looks like. We know we read from the left to the right, so the key instructions are down the left-hand side. We know we like pictures and symbols, and you can see those liberally used down the left-hand side. We know the brain wants to be introduced to detail one level at a time, so you can see the process schematic and each of the key bullet points for each key step with photographs for the most important. So, that's a really brain-friendly document, and I think if you ask your users, what would you prefer, 20-page SOP or that, I think we know what the answer would be. So user-centered design is key in improving human reliability in everything, from plant through to equipment, through the process, as well as the procedures. Let's move on then to number 6. We just got, we just got under 10 minutes to go, so we'll be done and dusted by then, so please stick with me. Attribute number 6, and in all of these companies that focus on human reliability and improving it, they recognize that people always make mistakes, the danger there. And for those of you in safety or have worked in safety, this model will not be unusual, not be a surprise to you. It's what we call the Swiss cheese model, because it recognizes that accidents will happen or mistakes will be made, and therefore it's really important to have a system of defenses that will capture, contain, and remove errors as and when they occur. And in the pharma industry, this defense system is actually our quality management system. And as you can see with these barriers, these independent barriers, they have holes in them. They're not perfect. Why? Because we've designed them. And each hole represents a latent error, a hidden error waiting to happen, often introduced by poor leadership decisions, poor budgetary decisions. So when training budgets are cut, that introduces lots of hole within the system defense called training. When we overcomplicate SOPs, that introduces lots of holes into that important system defense. So the more complicated our quality system, the more holes we have, and the greater the risk of an error going all the way through. And this is where we're reliant on our Audit and Self Inspection system and our Deviation and CAPA system to find these holes, in other words, weaknesses in our system defenses, our quality system, and to fix them. So best-in-class companies really work hard to ensure their system defenses or their system safeguards, the quality management system, can be relied upon to capture, to contain, to flag up, and to remove reliability issues sooner rather than later. And there's some action points there, ladies and gentlemen, to think about and to digest after this session on how system defenses, your quality system, can be improved. Later this year, we're going to be running best-in-class practices for pharmaceutical quality systems. It's usually October, November, and this is where we start to examine best-in-class practices for these invaluable system defenses. Number 8, we're almost there. Number 8, best-in-class companies, when it comes to human reliability and improving that, they focus on prevention rather than reaction. And they actively go about removing risk factors. So an example, and these risk factors may be structural, they may be to do with the building, they may be to do with workload, they may be to do with systems. And the best-in-class companies don't wait for mistakes to happen, they go out there and spot possible contributing factors and they fix them before they do. So for example, one of our clients, every morning, they give a couple of operators a digital camera, they let them loose on the facility for a couple of hours, and their job is to take pictures of mistakes waiting to happen, these risk factors. They bring those pictures back, and somebody is then dispatched to fix the problem before it actually becomes a problem. So it's about prevention. It's about removing these ticking time bombs. So these latent failures waiting to happen, are found and they are diffused. And these very focused self-inspections play an invaluable role in actually achieving that. This is a real picture of a workshop on the left-hand side that one of our auditors found. That is an error-rich environment, mistakes waiting to happen, whereas you contrast that with the cleanliness on the right-hand side. High standards of GMP encourage a high standard of personal behaviour. Number 9, best-in-class companies, when they're serious about human reliability, ladies and gentlemen, focus on education rather than training. We have a saying at NSF which goes along the lines of, we educate our children, we train our pets. And there's a massive difference between the two. Education is about influencing workplace behaviour. I'm not going to go into this in any more detail because later on in our calendar of webinars, there is a session dedicated entirely to how you change workplace behaviours. And that is moving away from PowerPoints. That's why I'm always uncomfortable doing webinars, because unfortunately the medium forces you to use PowerPoints, and frankly PowerPoint-based sessions change very little. And this is something that we're going to examine later on in the year when we talk about how to improve workplace behaviours. So in the last couple of minutes, ladies and gentlemen, just to bring this to a close, error reduction will significantly improve human reliability. And I've gone through most of these. There's one I left off at the end because of time. And I hope I've given you 2 things. Number 1, the confidence and the realization that this is already being practiced, in fact, by many of your competitors. So the attributes that I've covered, from problem understanding the anatomy of the problem through to investing heavily in education and training, education learning rather than training, if you do all of these, you will significantly improve human reliability. But this is a journey. It's not an event. This is a process that will never ever stop. And I hope that some of the practical solutions I've given you in the very short time that we've been together at least gives you some guidance as well as some hope. Now, my challenge to you, your 6 to fix. Number 1, please, because you're all busy people, please go away and just reflect and digest on what we've been discussing here. Discuss your scores. Choose one and just act on one. Please, and we do mean this most sincerely, give us a call for some free advice. You know the number. Get all of the contact details off our website. Drop me an email. That's Martin Lush at nsf.org. Give the office a call here on 0044 1751 432 999. We really are passionate about helping our clients, and this advice is free. We have a LinkedIn group as well on human error. Not always very active because we don't have many active members, so please, this is your opportunity. It's your space to learn and share. No comments go through there without me seeing them. Any comment put on the LinkedIn group, I will personally reply to, because we're really passionate about giving advice that will help and guide each and every one of you. And as I said earlier, number 5, remember this is a journey, not an event, and you've got to stick with it. And please come and join us on some of our events. If you can't come and join us, then we can certainly come to you to give you the advice and the education that you actually need. And the last one, really, ladies and gentlemen, help us to improve your reliability. My colleague in the States, Jim Morris, is running a a webinar on documentation error reduction. So please feel free to subscribe to that in March. Register now for the rest of our 2015 webinar program. I say quickly, interestingly, I mean, it's going out in the webinars are out in the journal, but before they were even out in the journal, quite a few of them are already fully subscribed. So please go onto the website. You know, these webinars are designed to help you. They're free. They're meant to give you advice that is practical. They're meant to be targeting the challenges that you are facing, because our aim and objective is to help your life, make your life a whole lot easier. We have a session in the UK, Manchester, on human error prevention, improving human reliability. The dates are there, and you know, this subject is always popular with a lot of our clients, which is why we do a lot of these sessions that are customized and in-house education programs, where we really focus very much on what you do. So I'm just quickly going through some of the last comments here, guys. Jerome, comment, Martin, could you send the notes to each person attending the webinar? I'll certainly do that, Jerome. Another comment, can you please confirm the LinkedIn group for error? Yeah, if you're on LinkedIn, if you go into LinkedIn, there is a group there on, if you have any problems, just drop me an email and I'll direct you to it. It's a group that I formed a couple of years ago, so it should be fairly visible on LinkedIn, but if it's not, please drop me a line and I'll make sure that you get there. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all staying with me. I hope you've found it a useful hour. Please, I really do value your feedback. This is a program of webinars that we're going to be running through the year. I have to be perfectly honest, it's not my preferred method of communicating with my clients, but it's convenient. But anything we can do better, please just drop me a line. So any feedback, comment, let me know. And have a great day, and speak to you soon on the webinars that then follow. Thanks very much.